Welcome to a space where we explore the hidden corridors of the human heart, where choices made in secret have consequences that ripple out into the light. If you are compelled by stories that delve into the complexities of love and betrayal, make sure you press that subscribe button and activate notifications, because this journey is one you won't want to miss. My name is Eleanor, but most people call me Nora. For 18 years of marriage, I had been the dependable one, the anchor in my family's small, quiet sea. I saw myself as a good wife and a devoted mother, a woman who made the right choices even when they were the hard ones. My career as a landscape architect was fulfilling our home. In the misty suburbs of Portland was my cherished sanctuary, and my marriage, though not flawless, felt like a deep and sturdy oak. My husband Robert was my rock. We had weathered 2 decades together. The initial fiery spark of our youth had long ago settled into the cozy, comfortable embers of a lasting partnership. He was a good man, steady and kind, a professor of history at the local university, more passionate about the Peloponnesian War than any grand romantic gestures. But he remembered my birthday, held my hand during the scary parts of movies, and had a way of looking at me from across a crowded room that for years had made me feel utterly and completely secure. At least that's what I chose to believe. Then there was Caleb. Caleb was the missing piece we had searched for through a decade of heartbreaking infertility. We adopted him when he was 15, a boy who had been adrift in the chaotic currents of the foster care system for most of his young life. When he first arrived at our door, he was a ghost of a boy, quiet, watchful, and coiled as tight as a spring, his eyes holding the deep, weary shadows of the turmoil he'd endured. Robert and I made it our mission to provide him with the stability and unconditional love he had been so cruelly denied. For a time, it felt like we were succeeding. Under the shelter of our quiet life, Caleb slowly unfurled. The haunted look in his eyes was replaced by a tentative confidence, and he blossomed into a kind, intelligent, and wickedly funny young man. By the time he was 18, a senior in high school, my pride in him was a fierce, protective sun in the center of my chest. He was in every way that mattered my son. But as the years passed, as he grew from a lanky boy into a young man with broad shoulders and a jawline that sharpened with every passing month, I began to sense a subtle shift in the currents of our home. Caleb's attachment to me started to feel different. It was more than the gratitude of a rescued child. He became my shadow, trailing me through the house, his presence a constant warm weight at my back. He'd sit beside me on the couch to watch a movie, his leg pressed against mine, and an inexplicable illicit flutter would stir deep in my belly. I was an expert at rationalization. It's nothing I'd tell myself. He's just a boy who has never known a mother's consistent love, and I am the closest he has ever come to that. I clung to that explanation like a life raft, even as a deeper, more unsettling truth began to surface. It was in his gaze. Sometimes I'd look up from a book or my gardening and find him watching me, and the look in his eyes was not how a son should look at his mother. His gaze held a raw, searching hunger, a profound longing that twisted my stomach with a nauseating cocktail of guilt and a strange, unnamed thrill. Robert saw it too. He was a quiet man, not one for confrontation, but I saw it in the subtle clenching of his jaw when Caleb would choose the seat next to me at dinner. I saw it in the sideways glances he'd shoot me, his eyes clouded with a discomfort he couldn't bring himself to name. He was a good father and he loved Caleb dearly, but this new intensity in our son made him uneasy. He didn't want to hurt Caleb's feelings or seem accusatory, so he, like me, retreated into silence. We both acted as if everything was perfectly normal, even as the unspoken tension in our house thickened daily, becoming a palpable, suffocating fog. The night that everything changed was a warm, late summer evening. One of those nights where the air is thick and still pregnant with the promise of a storm. Robert was at the university burning the midnight oil grading papers for his upcoming midterms. After a quiet dinner, Caleb retreated to his room to study, and I tackled the cleanup in the kitchen. The house was eerily quiet, a heavy silence that seemed to press down on me, amplifying the sound of my own breathing. I wrapped up the last of the dishes and headed down the hall to check on Caleb before turning in for the night. His door was slightly ajar. I could hear the faint melancholic strains of a guitar playing from inside. I knocked softly, my knuckles rapping against the wood. "Caleb, everything okay in there?" There was no answer. Thinking he might have fallen asleep with his music on, I nudged the door open wider and peeked inside. The sight that met my eyes stole the breath from my lungs. Caleb was sitting on the edge of his bed, his back to the door, completely oblivious to my presence. His shirt was off, his broad young shoulders slumped forward. His jeans were unbuttoned, and his hand was moving rhythmically beneath the waistband. I had stumbled upon a private moment, a secret act I was never, ever meant to see. My breath hitched. A whirlwind of shock, embarrassment, and a strange voyeuristic curiosity surged through me. The right thing to do, the motherly thing to do, was to back away, silently pull the door closed, and pretend I had seen nothing. I didn't. I stood frozen in the doorway, my feet rooted to the floor, my eyes fixed on the scene before me. I watched as his movements grew more urgent, more desperate, and then, as if he could feel the weight of my gaze upon him, he suddenly spun around. Our eyes locked across the dimly lit room. For a single suspended heartbeat, the world stopped. Caleb's face, which had been flushed with pleasure, instantly flooded with the crimson stain of horror and humiliation. He yanked his hand away, scrambling to button his jeans, his movements clumsy and panicked. A wave of profound guilt and shame washed over me, but right alongside it there was an undeniable electric thrill that twisted my stomach into knots. "Nora." He choked out, his voice shaking, using my first name in his shock. I didn't know you were there." My own voice was gone. My mind was a roaring chaos of should-haves. I should have apologized. I should have fled. I should have erased the image from my mind and from the space between us. But I stood there staring at the beautiful, terrified young man on the bed, my body betraying me in ways I couldn't yet admit even to myself. Without a single coherent thought, I stepped into the room, and I closed the door behind me. The soft click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a point of no return. The air in Caleb's room was thick and electric, as if the very walls were holding their breath. He sat on the bed, his face still flushed, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, something that made my stomach clench. "Nora," he murmured again, his voice barely a breath. I'm so sorry. You weren't supposed to see that." My mind was racing, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it from across the room. I should have turned around, opened the door, and walked out. I should have stammered my own apology and told him we would never speak of this again. I didn't. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on his. "It's okay," I said, and I was horrified to hear the tremor in my own voice. "You don't have to be sorry." Caleb's eyes widened. For a brief, fleeting moment, he looked like a frightened child again, vulnerable, uncertain, craving reassurance. But then his expression shifted. The fear receded, replaced by something darker, something hungry. He stood up slowly, deliberately closing the distance between us until only a few feet of charged air separated us. "Nora," he said again, his voice low and unsteady. I can't stop thinking about you." His words sent a shiver through me, not of cold, but of a strange, terrifying heat. A whirlwind of guilt-shame, and that same unnamed feeling churned within me. I knew this was wrong, so profoundly wrong, a sacred line I should never even approach, let alone consider crossing. But the intensity of his gaze and the sheer physical presence of his body so close to mine left me flustered, my carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "Caleb?" I whispered, my voice pleading with him, with myself. "Don't. This isn't right." He shook his head, his eyes brimming with a desperate, painful longing. "I know it's not right," he said, his voice cracking. "But I can't control it. You're the only one who's ever really seen me, Nora. The only one who's ever made me feel like I matter." His words were a knife to the heart, slicing through my resolve, igniting a rush of both maternal guilt and feminine pride. He was my son, the boy I had sworn to protect. And yet, I didn't want to push him away. A dark, selfish part of me craved his adoration just as fiercely as he seemed to crave mine. Before I fully registered my own actions, my hand was moving, reaching out to touch his face, my fingers tracing the sharp masculine line of his jaw. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. For a heartbeat, he froze, his gaze locked on mine, a silent question hanging in the air between us. Then he leaned in and he kissed me. It was not an innocent kiss, not the chaste peck on the cheek a son would give his mother. It was ravenous and urgent, a kiss bursting with all the unspoken longing and pain he had held inside for years. It was a kiss of desperation, of confusion, of a love that had grown twisted and wild in the dark. And God help me, I kissed him back. For that brief suspended infinity, I lost myself. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a mother. I was only a woman starved for a passion I had forgotten existed, and I was drowning in the sensation of his lips on mine. When he finally pulled away, we were both gasping for air, our faces flushed with a toxic mixture of shame and desire. I wanted to tell him this could never happen again. I wanted to salvage some piece of the world we had just shattered. But the words were stuck in my throat, choked by the riot of my own pulse. I turned and fled from his room, slamming my own bedroom door shut behind me, locking it tight, as if that could keep the truth at bay. I lay in bed all night, staring at the ceiling, my body trembling, trying to convince myself it was just a mistake, a fleeting moment of weakness that I could shake off in the morning light. But I knew. Deep in the marrow of my bones, I knew the truth. That kiss hadn't been an ending. It had ignited a dark and dangerous fire within me, and I had no idea how to put it out. I wasn't even sure I wanted to. In the days following that first kiss, our home became a landscape of unspoken truths. Guilt and confusion swirled around me like a constant disorienting fog. I avoided Caleb at every turn, throwing myself into work projects, weeding the garden with a frantic energy, anything to keep my hands and mind occupied. But no matter how busy I kept myself, he was always there, a permanent resident in my thoughts. The memory of his lips on mine replayed in an endless loop, a vivid, high-definition reminder of my transgression and my deep, lingering desire. Caleb seemed equally torn. He kept his distance physically, but I could feel his gaze on me whenever we were in the same room. It was a tangible thing, a weight on my skin. A silent, crackling tension grew between us until the very air in the house felt thick and oppressive, charged with a dangerous energy. Robert, bless his oblivious heart, definitely felt it. He didn't know the cause, but he could sense the shift. He'd look from my strained face to Caleb's sullen one at the dinner table, a puzzled frown creasing his brow. "Is everyone all right?" he'd ask. and Caleb and I would both murmur our assent, the lie hanging between us like a shroud. I was too ashamed to speak the truth, and I think in his own way Robert was too afraid to hear it. Then came the night the dam finally broke. Robert was away at a 2-day history conference in Seattle, leaving Caleb and me alone in the house. All day we had performed a careful, tense dance of avoidance, moving through the rooms like ghosts never quite making eye contact, the silence stretching between us taut and fragile. By evening, the tension had reached a breaking point. I poured myself a large glass of wine, the liquid a poor substitute for the courage I lacked. I was sitting on the couch staring blankly at the muted television when Caleb walked into the room. For a long moment, he just stood there, his piercing blue eyes locked on me. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and unsteady. "Nora," he said, and the way he spoke my name like an intimate confession sent a shiver down my spine. "We need to talk." I took a long sip of my wine, trying to steady my nerves. About what, Caleb, I asked, though I knew. I knew exactly what this was about. He moved further into the room, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jeans. "About what happened," he said. "The other night." "That was a mistake," I said quickly, my voice shaking. "It was a terrible mistake, and it can never, ever happen again." He shook his head, a pained, almost wounded look on his face. "It wasn't a mistake," he said, his voice raw. "Not for me. I've felt this way for so long, Nora. I never knew how to say it." My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Caleb, you are my son." I said the words, feeling like a lie in my mouth. "This is wrong. I'm not your son," he suddenly exclaimed, his voice rising, cracking with a pain that stunned me. "Not really. You didn't give birth to me. We aren't blood. You took me in when I was almost a man already." His words landed like a physical blow. A part of me wanted to argue, to insist on the bonds of love and family we had built. But another darker part of me seized on his words as a justification, a permission slip. He wasn't my son by blood. He was a boy we had taken in a young man who had come into our lives by chance. But even that twisted logic couldn't erase the fundamental wrongness of it all. "Caleb, please," I urged, my voice cracking with the strain. "Don't do this. This is not okay." He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides, his eyes blazing with a desperate intensity. "I don't care if it's right or wrong anymore," he said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "I love you, Nora. And I think you love me too." I tried to protest, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. In that horrifying, liberating moment, I admitted the truth to myself. I loved him. Not as a mother loves a son, but as a woman loves a man. The realization was a terrifying plunge into an icy abyss. Before I could react, before I could summon a single shred of my former self, he surged forward and kissed me again. This time I didn't run. This time I didn't pull away. I met his kiss with a hunger that matched his own, a surrender so total it obliterated everything else. My fingers tangled in the thick hair at the nape of his neck, and the wine glass slipped from my numb grip, shattering on the hardwood floor, the sound lost in the rush of blood in my ears. In that instant, nothing else mattered. Not my marriage, not my values, not the life I had so carefully constructed. There was only Caleb and the way he made me feel seen, desired, alive. The kiss deepened, and it wasn't long before we stumbled from the living room, leaving the shattered glass behind us, a fitting symbol for the life I had just broken. We ended up in my bedroom, in the bed I shared with my husband, clothes strewn across the floor like casualties of a beautiful, terrible war. It was wrong, so deeply and irrevocably wrong, but in the heat of the moment I couldn't bring myself to care. After years of feeling like a ghost in my own life, I was finally thrillingly, undeniably present. Later, as we lay tangled in the sheets, the storm of our passion having passed a fragile quiet settled over the room. Caleb's head was resting on my chest, his fingers idly tracing patterns on my skin. I should have felt guilty. I should have been consumed with shame. But all I felt was a strange, unsettling calm, a sense of rightness in the most wrong of situations. "This doesn't change anything," I whispered, trying to reassure myself more than him. "This can't happen again." Caleb lifted his head, his blue eyes deep and intense in the dim light. "It already has, Nora," he said softly. "And it's going to keep happening." I wanted to argue. I wanted to prove him wrong. But I couldn't. Because deep down I knew he was right. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the beginning of a new chapter 1 that would irrevocably change us all. The weeks that followed spun into a dizzying frenzy of secrecy and guilt. By day, Caleb and I were masters of deception, performing a strained pantomime of normal family life for Robert's benefit. We were careful not to exchange loaded glances, not to touch for a second too long, not to give away the electric secret that hummed constantly between us. But at night, when the house fell silent and Robert was lost in sleep beside me, our home transformed. The quiet hallways became a battleground between my conscience and my temptation. I knew it was wrong, a betrayal of the highest order, but I was helpless against the pull. Caleb became an obsession, an addiction I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. I would wait until Robert's breathing was deep, and even then slip from our bed and steal down the hall to Caleb's room, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Robert remained blissfully unaware. He was so consumed by his work, so wrapped up in the predictable rhythms of his own life, that he missed the subtle cues. He didn't see the way Caleb's eyes would follow me around a room, or the way my hands would tremble slightly when he spoke to me. The cracks were forming in the foundation of our marriage, a chasm opening up between Robert and me, and he never even saw it coming. I told myself it was just a phase, a temporary madness that would pass as soon as Caleb left for college. But I knew beneath it all that I was lying to myself. Then one evening, the first tremor of the coming earthquake shook our fragile world. Robert came home from the university looking pale, and drawn the weight of a new worry etched onto his face. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he walked in and slumped down at the table. "We need to talk," he said, his voice thick with a fatigue that went beyond his usual academic weariness. I froze my hand, hovering over the pot on the stove, my heart seizing in my chest. "He knows," was my first panicked thought. This is it. This is the moment it all falls apart. "What's wrong?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady and casual. Robert sighed, raking a hand through his thinning hair. "It's Caleb," he said. "He's in some kind of trouble." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me, immediately followed by a hot flush of guilt for feeling it. "What are you talking about?" "I got a call from his school counselor today." Robert said, his brow furrowed. "He's been acting out, skipping classes, getting into fights in the hallway. They said his grades are slipping. They're concerned." I frowned, my own thoughts racing. This was completely out of character for Caleb. He had always been a model student, quiet, well-behaved, diligent. "Did they say why?" I asked. Robert shook his head. "No, but I have a feeling it's tied to his past. All that trauma, bouncing between homes. It's a lot for a kid to handle. Maybe it's all just catching up to him and he's having a hard time adjusting." I nodded numbly, but a nagging, sickening feeling lingered. Caleb had been acting strangely, but I had attributed it to the affair, to the tension of our secret. Could there be more to it? Later that night, after Robert had fallen asleep, I slipped into Caleb's room. He was sitting on his bed, staring at the wall, his expression vacant. "Caleb," I said softly, sitting down beside him, "your dad told me about school. "What's going on?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then he turned to face me, and I was shocked by the raw anger and pain burning in his eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Nora," he said, his voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "I can't keep pretending everything is okay when our lives are falling apart." My heart plummeted. "What are you trying to say?" He jumped up from the bed and began to pace the small room, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is tearing me apart," he burst out. "I love you, but I can't keep sneaking around lying to Robert. It's not fair, to him or to me." A lump formed in my throat. "Jake. Caleb?" "No." He cut me off, his voice escalating, cracking with anguish. "Don't say anything. You started this. You were the one who kissed me that night, the one who made me think. You're all I can think about, and it's messing me up. This isn't right, Nora. It's just not right." My eyes welled with tears as the crushing weight of his words hit me. He was right. I had started it. I had crossed that line. I had taken his vulnerable, complicated love for me and twisted it into something selfish and destructive to satisfy my own needs. And now he was paying the price. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I never ever meant to hurt you." Caleb stopped pacing and turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "I know you didn't," he said quietly. "But it doesn't change what's happened. And now I don't know what to do." I reached for his hand, my fingers squeezing his tightly. "We'll figure it out, Caleb." I said the words, feeling hollow and false. "Together. I'll protect you." But even as I spoke, I knew I was lying. There was no simple escape from the chaos we had created. The damage was done. I wanted to believe we could fix it, but deep down I could feel the ground crumbling beneath our feet. I had to end it. I had to confess. The confession was the hardest thing I have ever done. The next evening, I sat Robert down in our living room, the same room where my affair had truly begun, and I told him everything. I watched as his kind, gentle face morphed from confusion to disbelief to a profound, hollowed-out horror that was far worse than any rage could have been. He didn't yell. He just sat there, his hands clasped together, as the world he thought he knew dissolved around him. He left the house that night and he didn't come back. The divorce was swift and ruthless. He didn't fight for the house or the money. He just wanted out. He wanted me gone. And I couldn't blame him. On a cold gray morning a few months later, the final decree arrived in the mail. I sat on the floor of our now empty living room, the sale of the house pending, staring at the papers in my hands, feeling as though my life had ended. Caleb was struggling to find his footing. He dropped out of school and got a job stocking shelves at a local grocery store, but it was clear he was just going through the motions. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only to lash out his grief and confusion curdling into a bitter resentment. "You ruined my life," he said to me one night, his voice trembling with rage. "You took away my only chance at having a normal family." I wanted to argue to point out his role in the affair, but I knew it was pointless. I was the adult. I was the one who should have known better. I had taken his fragile trust and shattered it. One evening, while packing up the last of my belongings in the attic, I stumbled upon a box of old photographs. They were snapshots of Robert and me from the early days of our marriage, young, happy, incandescently in love. As I flipped through them, tears streaming down my face, I found a letter at the bottom of the box, tucked into an old photo album. It was from Robert, written the night before our wedding. He wrote of his boundless love for me, his excitement to start our life together, his dream of growing old by my side. "Nora," he had written, "you are my entire world. I cannot imagine a single day without you. I promise to love you, to cherish you, and to be faithful to you for all of my days." A profound, aching sadness washed over me, a grief for the life we had lost, for the love I had thrown away, for the people we used to be. I was lost with only the letter, the memories, and the crushing weight of my choices for company. I packed everything back into the box and shoved it into a dark corner of the attic, but I knew it would always be there, a silent, damning testament to everything I had destroyed. A single secret can become a poison that contaminates every corner of a life. When the lines we draw for ourselves become blurred, it's often not just our own lives we risk destroying. Thank you for joining this exploration of a difficult story. If you were moved or intrigued, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Until next time, stay safe in your truths.